Mike James was the living embodiment of a journeyman. He played for 11 teams in 12 years, and for the most part, he was pretty mediocre. The reason I say for the most part though, is because he had one random year in Toronto where he blew up, averaging 20 points, 5 assists, and 3 rebounds a game, while knocking down 2 threes a game. Quite an accomplishment for 2006 shooting standards. Compare this year to the rest of his career, and you can see very clearly that this season is beyond standout. And most importantly, he played best when the lights shined the brightest. One of his best games of the year came on January 22nd, 2006, a date you might remember for some other reason. This was Kobe's 81-point night. But at first, this was the Mike James show, and it stayed that way for quite a while. Before we get into the game though, be sure to subscribe for weekly NBA content. Trust me, we're up in the quality, and I got some big things in the works that I know you're not going to want to miss out on. Click that little red button, it's just so easy and quick, and I'd really appreciate it. And with that, let's take a deep dive into some of the most memorable footage in NBA history, and how one part of it, Mike James, somehow managed to go so forgotten.
Four straight wins at home, the purple and gold have turned it around after a slow 6-8 start. Tonight, Chris Bosh leads his surging Toronto Raptors into Los Angeles, and they try to slow down Kobe and the fellas. Laker basketball starts next.
The introduction of this game tries to hype viewers up for a Kobe Bryant, Chris Bosh back and forth battle. And although we do get a battle of sorts, Chris Bosh has nothing to do with it. He'll score 18 points, but will go largely forgotten. You know, after Kobe literally flips those two scoring numbers around. We kick off the game with a violation by Kobe Bryant himself, who accidentally kicks the ball and racks up a violation before he even gets a point. Mike James then hits Morris Peterson with the sweet one-handed bounce pass, and now he's got himself an assist. We're not going to really be keeping track of assist highlights, but here's some foreshadowing. Mike James is going to get a lot of assists. Mike James then strikes yet again. Bosh kicks it out to him, and he knocks down the three. Kobe then comes right back down the court and swoops in for a flashy reverse layup. It's taken him nearly 2.5 minutes to get his first point, but we all know that this slow start will not last. The Mamba then knocks down one of his signature mid-range turnarounds while being tightly covered. Bryant 4, James 3. Never fear though, Mike James is here. He retaliates with yet another 3, this one from the corner, now making him 2 for 2 from beyond the arc and hitting his season average for threes made in just 4 minutes. Bryant 4, James 6. The two both go on a bit of a cold streak for the next 2 minutes before resuming their rivalry, but during that time, Kobe misses 4 straight shots and the Raptors climb up to a 10-point lead, forcing LA to call timeout. We are now more than halfway through the first quarter, and Bryant only has 4 points. If anything, this is looking like a pretty bad game for him. As the game resumes, we see Kobe knock down the worst shot in basketball, a long 2 with 1 foot even on the 3-point line. It goes in, and now both him and James are tied with 6 points apiece. Not too long after, Kobe gets another, slithering his way through what looks like the entirety of the Raptors' defense. Kobe 8, James 6. Doesn't matter to Mike though, he cuts off a Lamar Odom pass, sprints past Smush Parker, and dribbles it all the way down the court for the tough, fast break layup. We haven't really been keeping track of assists as I said earlier, but I think it's worth noting that James already has 6, meaning that he's responsible for 20 of Toronto's 29 points scored. For the record, Kobe will end up with 2 assists in the entire game, although it is pretty understandable why that is. Kobe comes right back down and gets another bucket at the basket, and then Mike James comes down and drills an off-the-dribble 3, shaking off 2 defenders and now boasting a stat line of 11 points and 6 assists after just 10 minutes of play. To put that in perspective, perspective, if he keeps this up, he'll have 44 and 24 by the end of the game. Spoiler alert, he doesn't keep this up, but this start is insane. Mike James will then come out of the game not too long after as Kobe is at the line, who knocks down both free throws. He'll then go on to hit 2 more free throws with 1 second left on the clock, and with that, we end the first quarter. Kobe has 14 points, and Mike James has a stat line of 11 and 6. With 1/4 of the game over with, Mike James is outplaying Kobe on Kobe's greatest night, but trust me, the best has still yet to come. We start off the second quarter with neither Kobe nor Mike James in the game. LA inserts Kobe at around the 6-minute mark, and he knocks down a triple before James checks in at around the 5-minute mark to avenge his team. 2 minutes later, James fakes the life out of Smush Parker and banks in a floater. Kobe 17, James 13. It's still a close battle. We then get this slam from Kobe on Matt Bonner, and James strikes right back with yet another 3-pointer as Smush Parker tries and fails to get away with a flop. With about 2 minutes left, things start to really get wild. Lamar Odom attacks, and a charge from James gives the big man his 3rd foul, taking him out from the game. James then gets right back up and finds Matt Bonner at the 3-point arc for his 8th assist of the half. Kobe retaliates with yet another one of his classic mid-range jumpers, and then he steals a pass from Mike James himself, runs down court, and gets the foul. At the line, he misses one of his free throw attempts, snapping a streak of 62 straight free throws made. The announcers go wild.
NBA record was 97.
Michael Williams.
Kobe missed it!
But he does get his own rebound and banks it home. Kobe 24, James 16. Things are getting out of hand, and now James is forced to play catch-up as the two continue their battle. He finds Chris Bosh and now has racked up 9 assists before the second quarter buzzer has even sounded. Kobe comes back and weaves his way through the Raptors' defense, and right after, James comes down and knocks down yet another triple to cap off the second quarter in a very Curry-esque fashion. Smush Parker is guarding him tight. He's dancing around the defense. A second defender comes up and he just knocks it down in all of their faces.
63-49.
I tell you what, I would love to be in the Laker locker room at halftime just to hear the verbiage.
By the end of the half, Kobe has 26 points. An incredible feat for sure, but not that much when you take into account the fact that he's about to go for 80. And even though Kobe probably had the better highlights, Mike James has had just as good of a game, if not better, halfway through it. He has 19 points and 9 assists. He's 5 for 5 from 3 and is responsible for 38 of Toronto's 60 points. 19 from points he scored personally, and 19 more that were caused by his assists. Oh, and by the way, Toronto is beating the Lakers by 11. Bias aside, I think Mike James is winning this battle. Him and his team are beating Kobe on his best game ever, and the Raptors were one of the worst teams in the league, if not the worst. The halftime report is absolutely brutal to the Lakers. This guy, Jack Haley, is straight up tearing them apart. Check it out.
The Raptors 63-49 at the break. So, Jack, let me ask you this. They're down 14. Is that a deficit that Kobe Bryant alone can overcome?
No, he can't. And if I'm Phil Jackson in the locker room right now, I'm not burning incense. I'm not hitting the chimes. I'm pulling out the cattle prod, and I'm waking some players up. Lamar Odom, I'm hitting him right in the chest. Lamar, 0 points, 1 rebound. Devin George, 0 points. The Lakers, other than Kobe Bryant, 10 of 32 from the floor. And let's remember something, Mike. You're playing the Toronto Raptors, one of the worst teams in the NBA. This game is going to be about effort, focus, and getting back and playing some defense. You give up 63 points, you turned the ball over 10 times, and nobody other than Kobe showed up to play. Cattle prod. That's my key to the second half. Wake up! Wake up!
This dude was trying so hard to be Stephen A. Smith before Stephen A. Smith. Also, take a look at this halftime report. Be aware of the wording, the man they choose to highlight on screen. Notice that there is 0 mention of Kobe. Take a look.
The National Basketball Association. Right now, though, it's the Raptors all over the Lakers, and something that was not unexpected in the fact that The Raptors are one of the higher scoring teams in the NBA, but we didn't think that the Lakers would play this poorly on defense. Welcome back, Houston.
Yup, that's a graphic of Mike James flashing up his stats and his highlights. Kobe who? And as if this night couldn't get any crazier for Mike James, the announcers then start literally comparing him to LeBron.
They can do that. All they have to do is play a little bit of defense, and to do that, you got to stay on your feet and challenge some shots. James, is that LeBron James? Oh, no, that's Mike James. He had 19 points on 7 out of 8 shooting from the field.
And yes, it is insane to think about the fact that LeBron James was in the league even all the way back then. But here's the most important part, the third quarter, or at least the very beginning of it. Kobe misses a 3, then another mid-range jumper, and then who but Mike James spots up and knocks down another triple. Yet again, the LeBron comparison is brought up. The announcers are at a loss for words.
Raptors, despite their loss to Toronto the other night, how about Mike James? How about Mike James? Another three-pointer.
Well, he's doing his LeBron James imitation tonight. He's 6 for 6 from behind the three-point line.
He's 6 for 6 now, but what makes this shot so important is the fact that it means that Mike James has outplayed Kobe Bryant on the best night of his career for over half the game. Majority rules. This game is officially the Mike James game. He played better than Kobe for a longer span of time than Kobe played better than him. He wins. So I ask you again, Kobe who? 81 points who? All I know about is the Mike James game. Then Kobe goes wild. With 23 minutes left in the game, he only has 26 points, but by the time there are 43 seconds left in it, he'll have 81. James didn't have a bad second half at all, but it actually was below average even for his standards that season. He'd end the game with 26 points and 10 assists, but by halftime, he was on pace to have a 40-20 game. I think moments like these just go to show the story aspect of NBA history. These players really do fill in the role of characters. These moments are like really good chapters, and people just kind of like the sound of being aware of a legendary moment without grasping the full context. You would have thought that Mike James's insane first half would have gotten a lot of attention given how many eyes watched this game, but the truth is, most people haven't even looked at the footage, and if they are, they're only looking for Kobe, aka the main character. Mike James is merely a side character, just another guy on the court trying and failing to guard Kobe, just like all of his other Raptor teammates. These guys are just filler players, filler names, filler faces, they're just there by chance. Anybody could be guarding Kobe in these moments, no one really cares. He got 81 points, and Mike James's little side quest of a successful first half is cool and all, but 81 points just has a much better ring to it. Most of us will tell our kids that Kobe dropped 81 points. Maybe we'll see some highlights of the game from time to time, but Mike James will never be included in any of them. But it's true, some random player that you've probably never heard of outplayed Kobe for a majority of the game in a game many consider the greatest performance by a single player in league history. That's wild, and I thought it deserved some much needed attention. Those who actually watched the game though, they took notice. Take a look at these surprised commenters underneath the YouTube video of Kobe's 81-point game, praising James for his efforts. I will admit these ones are nitpicky, most comments are talking about Kobe of course, but there's more about Mike James than you would think. Goes to show just how watching the video and getting the full context of the game really shines a light on Mike James for more of the game than it does even Kobe. This is far from a flawless performance by the Black Mamba. That 81-point number is very deceiving. From the slow start to the continuous shooting slumps he'll go on from time to time, it's kind of an ugly game, especially in the beginning, but things just come together in the end all so perfectly. And slowly Mike James fades into the background, becoming nothing more than a distant memory. This was a once-in-a-lifetime moment for Mike James to finally be the man, the star with the spotlight. It will never happen and again in his career, and yet he still can't even get it this one time. Alright, enough beating around the bush. If I'm Mike James, I'm pissed. So, what happened to Mike James after all this? Well, it's fair to say that this was the highest point of his career. While Kobe was busy forming a dynasty alongside Pau Gasol in LA, the man who outplayed him on his best game would go on to play for 6 more teams and average 7 points and 3 assists in the years following his one with the Raptors. A couple months ago, a podcast where Mike James spoke about Kobe's 81-point night was finally released, where James dropped a fun fact that even I didn't know about. He's the first and only undrafted player to average 20 points in a season. Oh yeah, forgot to mention that, but he also was undrafted. So to make the story even better, an undrafted man outplayed Kobe on the best night of his career. Anyways, allow me to show you all a snippet of this podcast where James talks about his perspective on Kobe's 81-point game. Take a look.
So Mike, I'm gonna take it there. In Toronto, you guys come to LA to play against the Lakers. Let's talk. Let's
You got to talk about it. You have to talk about it.
We got to talk about it.
Now, this is the platform, Mike. This is the platform. So now we got to talk about the real platform.
We got to talk about it. So being in LA, playing against the Lakers, and they had this guy named Kobe Bean Bryant.
Yeah. You know what the craziest thing about that game is that I had a really good first half.
Damn right you did, Mike. Damn right. Sorry, let's continue.
And
Yes, you did.
Yes, you did.
I went into halftime thinking, Mike, you're shooting too much. You know what I mean? Let the game. I was like, let me start dropping dimes. Let me get CB in the game. Let me start getting Mo going. Let me get Jalen some more. So I started penetrating more, but instead of looking for my shot, I was thinking. So I started becoming passive. And Kobe never lost the energy that he had in the first half. And so my whole mindset the whole game was, we going to win this game. We still got a chance to win this game. Later for what he's doing, let's at least win this game. I look over at my bench. They over there. Oh, did you see the last movie? I look over at Coach over there. He can't even coach us right now because he thinking about and his head is in his clouds and he going. And I'm like, what? I'm like, are y'all serious right now? Everyone that was in the Staples Center was a Kobe fan that day, but me. I was so mad at everybody in that game. I didn't want to talk to nobody. I went on Romans Burning the next morning. It was like, we ain't had no strategy. It was like, I probably shouldn't have said a lot of the things I didn't say in my career. But I was so mad. And I remember, the crazy thing is, I remember saying to Sam Mitchell, let me guard Kobe. He said, no, Mike, I don't want you to get in foul trouble. I said, are you? I about it. And I listened to him. I don't know why I didn't just say, man, move and let me guard him and take the chance of getting in foul trouble. I listened to him. And
Mike, it was probably good, though. He'd
have probably had about 70 or 62.
Shout out to the Platform Basketball Podcast. That's the podcast this clip is from, and man, for a guy who wanted to kick it out more to his teammates more in the second half, getting only 1 more assist, and the man you're going toe-to-toe with dropping 55 points in that same span of time has got to be frustrating. The podcast features Norris Cole, Justin Holiday, and NBA trainer Chris Johnson. I'll leave a link to the full episode down below if you want to check it out for full context. You guys can see the size of my channel. This is not a sponsorship or anything. I'm an irrelevant little boy, but yeah, shout out to this podcast. I thought it would be nice hearing James's take on this game, and he seems like genuinely a really cool guy, so that kind of makes the story feel all the better. Shout out to you, Mike. You deserve to be recognized for all you did that game. And with that, we conclude this video. I know this one was a little different from some of my other stuff, but I enjoyed enjoyed making it, so let me know if you'd want more of this type of content in the future. I was just sitting there finally watching Kobe's 81-point game in full for the first time, and I kinda had to take a double take. I came in here expecting to watch Kobe just dominate throughout the game, and all I can focus on is this little dude named Mike James on the other team just giving Kobe the works. After seeing it all, I knew I just had to make a video about it, and hey, here we are at the very end of it. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. We are putting out content every single week. As you can probably already tell, these videos take a long time to make, so I would really appreciate your support. It's great motivation to keep me going and will ensure that I will be making more content in less time for you all to enjoy. You can follow my Twitter, it's at Kogostomus. I'm active over there. And as a closing statement, I would just like to say that the Mike James game is legitimately the best Kobe versus James game we've ever seen in history, and Mike James is the real MJ. Okay, bye.